Merry readers, come cozy in. Let the story time begin with Robin and the Merries.
Hi Merry Readers! Today is September 18th and I'm so excited because that means we are diving into chapter 1 of A Discovery of Witches. So this book is by Deborah Harkness, and if you missed my first video introducing what we will be doing for the next few weeks, I have decided to follow the calendar that Deborah Harkness put out for the live read-through of A Discovery of Witches, so it follows the timeline of the book, and I just think that's so fun. So I wanted to do this as a kind of book club-esque, informal group something that we could all do together, where if you're reading along too, we can talk in the comments. And I just wanted to share my ideas and talk about each chapter because this truly is one of my favorite books. So I will be starting with a little summary in each of these videos, and if you haven't already seen the calendar, please feel free to go over either to my Instagram, Robin and the Merry Reads, where I have it posted, or you can check out Deborah Harkness on Instagram because she also posted the original there. So I will be doing a summary. I have lots of notes that I typed up for what I want to share in this video, so hopefully I won't miss anything, but this is just supposed to be fun, informal, and just set the tone for the season. So I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy. I will be starting with a little summary, then I have come up with some categories for each chapter that I'll share at the beginning of each of the review videos that will just go over what I'm going to be talking about, and I hope that at the end you'll post what you think in the comments below. I also will have a little special question that if you want to answer that too, I'll share that at the end of the video. So my categories that I had in mind as I did this read through were really a fun way to look at this book in a new light. I've read this book probably about 10 times in my life, so I really wanted to come up with a new way that would make it fun and exciting so I could share the same energy as anyone who's reading it for the first time, and also maybe help those who, like me, read this every fall because it's just such a perfect autumn book. So my categories for this chapter that I kind of kept in my head and just thought about as I read through is I wanted to really take a look at the setting of where the chapter took place. I wanted to look at the historical and academic Easter eggs that are throughout the book. So in my last video I did mention that Deborah Harkness is actually a historian herself, so a lot of her characters are real people. There's of course a lot of embellishment and she took her liberties where she wanted to, as she should, but a lot of the artifacts and the characters are actually based on real people. So there's lots of Easter eggs throughout the book and I will be trying my best to point them out. But if I miss any, please feel free to post below, and if I get anything wrong, please feel free to help me out too, because I am not an expert, even though I've read this book about 10 times, but I am always happy to learn some new fun facts. So if you know something I don't know, please feel free to share it below, and I look forward to talking about that. I'm also going to be looking at the magic and the use of magic in each chapter because that definitely evolves over the course of the book. I'll be looking at the symbols and details in each chapter, and of course I'll talk about the romance. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a terribly over-the-top romantic book, but there definitely are some romantic moments and I will share those, and then if there's no romance in the chapter, we'll just skip over that. I also will mention all of the food and drink in the book because Deborah Harkness is such an expressive writer that she makes it so you can almost smell, taste, feel what she's writing about, and so I think that deserves to be acknowledged too throughout as we read it. I'll of course talk about the overall vibe. So the first chapter starts in Oxford in England, so that already sets the tone for kind of a dark, moody, dark academia vibe in the fall. And please feel free to comment about whether that's a vibe that you really enjoy, if you would prefer something else. I really want this to be kind of an open conversation. Any foreshadowing that I catch, I'm going to try really hard not to spoil any future chapters. I apologize if I slip up. Sometimes it's hard for me to keep my storyline completely accurate because I have read the whole book before, but I am rereading the chapters right before I do these videos and plotting out what I'm going to say, so I'm hopeful that I can keep it just to the chapter and not jump ahead too much. But I will hint at some foreshadowing if I see it in the story. And again, if I miss some foreshadowing that you know about in the chapter, please feel free to comment that below too. And then, of course, I'll finish off with our question of the day, but I'll save that for the end of this video. So, chapter 1 of A Discovery of Witches, we find Diana, who is our main character, who is a historian, and she is sitting in the Bodleian Library at Oxford, and she's surrounded by all of this knowledge and history because Oxford is a very old school. And so the book opens up right in the middle of her having a thought about something. We are just dropped right into the middle of it. And so right away, Diana goes up to a character that she knows named Sean. And we find out shortly that her and him went to undergrad together, or perhaps it was grad school. I forget exactly which one, but they used to be classmates. And he now works at the library, and she is there doing some research. So he brings out a stack of books that she has requested, and he brings out 3 at first, and then he kind of mentions, oh wait, there's one more here, and he brings over this big old book and plops it down on top of the others, and Diana immediately feels something when she looks at this book. Now, it is in this moment that she discloses to the readers that she is a witch, but she is not a practicing witch. So she's a little bit hesitant that she feels something off of this book because, as she explains, that usually means that the book might have some magical qualities. So she thanks Sean and she goes over to a desk and she begins to get ready to do her research. She is a very type A person, so she has everything planned out with what she's going to do that day. She talks a little bit about how Sean is kind enough to look the other way and to let her take out way more books than she's actually allowed to every time she's there. So this kind of gives this rich detail into who Diana is, and immediately we learn through some flashbacks that she shares that her mother was a witch, her father was a witch, and she grew up in a magical household. She shares some anecdotes about her mother doing some magic. She shares a little bit of a scary memory from when she was a child when a magical creature almost attacks them in the kitchen, and her father comes home and is able to help her work through that a little bit. But then she also shares that at age 7, her parents go on a trip to Africa, and while they were there, they died. And so after that, she went to live with her Aunt Sarah, and at that point, she swore off of magic because she blamed magic as the reason that her parents died, and so she has not really used magic since that day. And so after this little flashback, she's looking at this magical tome and remarks that it's Ashmole 782, and she goes to open it, and when she touches the book, she can feel magic and she hears whispering, and she's just a little bit hesitant to open it, but she does end up opening it. And when she does, what she notices inside is that it is definitely a bewitched book. The words glisten and they light up. Some of the words disappear, and Diana shares with the readers as she's going through these memories of her childhood that her aunt Sarah tried at 13 to teach Diana some magic, but she was not successful. And so when she turned 18, Sarah sent her off to college, and she tried a bunch of different majors. She talks about trying theater and all these different majors until finally it's her last year, and the college is telling her she'll have to be a fifth-year student, and she's just not sure what to do, and she decides to go to Oxford for the summer. And so while she's there, she falls in love with history. She declares a history major, and she ends up finishing her graduate program before she's 20 years old. And then after that, she decides to go for her doctorate. And so for her doctorate, she does 17th century chemistry, and then she works at Yale. Everyone is telling her that there's no way that she could get a position there, and especially not get tenured, but she is just this fierce boss lady character, and so she goes for it anyway. She gets the position, she gets tenure, and then after being tenured at Yale, she decides that for a little while she's going to go to Oxford to do some research on a paper that she's writing. And that's how she ended up in the Bodleian. And so she's looking at Ashmole 782, and she can feel the magic humming off of it. She talks about the book feeling like it's alive, and it has a hum of life to it. And so against her better judgment that she feels as a witch who does not practice, she opens the book, and what she sees when she opens the book is that inside the words and the pages are all alive with magic. So she immediately notices that the depictions in the books are all a little bit wrong from what she knows from her degree. And so she starts to jot down all the differences and things like that. And then she also notices that the pages are alive and the words start to glow. Some of them disappear as she's looking at them, and she notices that one of the pages is missing. So her historian side, her side that really respects the sanctity of the Bodleian, she doesn't allow herself to put her hands on the book because it's so old. So she closes the book, she puts it back on top of the stack of other books. She goes back to Sean and she returns the books, and she says, if I need to take it out again, I will, but for now, I'm just going to let it be, and I'm going to focus on myself. But as she returns the book, she feels a shift in the air, and she can feel magic all around her. And as she mentioned at the beginning of the chapter, the only other person who's there with her doing research is one of her fellow friends that she has studied with before, Jillian, who is actually also a witch, but Jillian is busy doing her own research. So that is where we are left off with chapter 1. Diana is sharing a lot with us in this chapter. I really like how Deborah Harkness uses these flashbacks to give exposition for the story, because as it is such a rich storyline, you do need some exposition. So I sometimes find that books that are really heavy in a lot of descriptions and things like that can be a bit boring, but the way that she does this, you don't really feel like you're just listening to, and this is my mom, and this is my dad, and this is my history. It flows so beautifully, so I really enjoyed that. Yeah, so Diana, we're learning a little bit more about her. We know that she's a historian, and she's doing a research project, and she's in Oxford in this beautiful place, but we don't really get to know too much more beyond that, except that she found a magical book. Looking at my questions that I was thinking about as I went through this story, this setting, of course, is the Bodleian Library, Oxford, Old England, in September. It's beautiful. It's just this autumnal vibe all around of coziness. I just imagine Diana wearing all of these cozy clothes. She's described in the book as being very put together and very studious. Deborah Harkness mentions that everything about Diana just screams serious academic. And I think that this is supposed to imply that she's worked so hard to be where she is. She's not just your average female character. She is a strong, academic, tenured Yale professor who is doing research in Oxford. And so her appearance is that she wears practical clothes, she has her hair pulled back and done in a very nice, sophisticated way. And she's just determined to be seen as an academic badass instead of a witch. So that is her whole vibe. That's really what she wants to be seen as. The next question is the characters. So in this chapter, we really only meet Sean and Jillian, and we don't know at this point if they're going to be main characters, if they are supporting characters, so we don't get to know a lot about them, but those are the only characters who are introduced to us in this first chapter. The historical and academic Easter eggs in this chapter is really Ashmole 782. So I did a little bit of research, and this is a real manuscript that went missing. And so historians have never been able to find it. And there's a lot of lore around it that people think that it could have magic in it, that it may have been a grimoire of sorts or something like that. A lot of people think that it was made by witches or wizards, things like that. So there is a lot of magical lore around this real book that Deborah Harkness is using as the kind of spark and fuel for the beginning of this story. Magic in this is subtle. There is a little bit, so we have the hum of the book, the whispering, the magic words that are disappearing and glowing, but nothing over the top. It's still very subtle and just hints at magic. And we know that Diana really doesn't like magic. She doesn't want to be a witch. She wants nothing to do with it. So that's what we know so far about the magic. The mood and tone is serious. Diana is a serious scholar, and so she is constantly in her own dialogue in her head, kind of brings herself back, and she makes little comments in her head about keeping serious and staying on track and not worrying about it. And she even has this dilemma at the end of, oh, well, the magic side of me would like to learn more about this book. Maybe I should put my hands on it and keep it and try to figure out what it is. But then the other side of her, the more practical side, said, oh, but you know what, scholars, sometimes if you find a book that doesn't match up with the research you're doing, it's easier to just pretend it never existed and move on. And so because of the magic and because of her not really knowing what to do, and she's trying to start this new chapter in Oxford for herself right now and doing research, and she doesn't want to lose the position that she's in by doing anything that would take her off track, she decides to put the book away. So that's kind of the mood, and the vibe is serious, but there's a little bit of intrigue that comes in, and we start to see that there's a bit of a conflict within Diana. Symbols, details. So the only symbol and detail we really have is the manuscript, Ashmole 782. Everything else is mostly just Diana talking about her past. We don't know if any of that is really important, I'm assuming, and I think that most people could assume that it would be important, but at this point we really don't know. And so I would say that there aren't a lot of symbols as of yet for this chapter. And food and drink, we didn't get to enjoy any of that yet, but I'm sure that's on the horizon. Overall vibe and character strength. So I think this is such an interesting point to get into right away. I think Diana's character is set up very strong. We know right away from all of the details that are given that she's strong, she's independent, she's smart, she knows what she wants, she's willing to fight for things that she wants, she's not going to take no for an answer. But we really don't know any of the other characters yet. All we know about Sean is that him and Diana used to go to school together and that he's willing to bend the rules for her. And Jillian, we really don't know anything about because all she did was do her own research. So at this point, I think Diana is definitely a strong character, but we really can't judge based off of other characters because we haven't been introduced to them yet. Foreshadowing. There's tons of foreshadowing in this first chapter, but in an effort to not spoil anything, I'm not really going to go into that because it would spoil the end of the trilogy, because really the foreshadowing of this first chapter is the end of the trilogy. So this is one of the few times where I just won't really mention or go into the foreshadowing much, but just know that there is a lot of foreshadowing, and if we do this whole series and we get to the end of the trilogy, I will definitely loop back around and talk about that. In the comments, if you would like to share a little bit about it, just please label that it's a spoiler for the end of the series before you go into it. I'm happy for people to talk about it below, but let's just be respectful to anyone who is reading this for the first time because we don't want to ruin the end for them. Yeah, and so just to end this video, for our first one, my big question that I would like to open up in the comments is, if you were Diana, studying in one of the most famous libraries in the world, and a magical manuscript dropped into your lap, would you risk opening it or shove it back as fast as possible? And just to take that a step further, if you were to open it, would you want to go to the ends of the earth to figure out what is so magical about it? Or would you do something similar like Diana and see that it is complicated and it is magical and perhaps put it back for another time? So I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Please feel free, if I missed anything, to mention it below. If I got anything wrong, please feel free to correct me below. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts. And I will see you all on the 21st for chapters 2 and 3. All are welcome here. Hope you can tag some people below, and if you haven't already, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!
So many readers, close your eyes. Let the stories lift and rise. Till next time, when lights will gleam.